Inside the stories that affect you. This is Inside KELOLAND.
Good evening, I'm Sammy Bieland. Thanks for joining us. South Dakota's population is about to increase as thousands of hunters converge on the state for the annual pheasant season. For many, this is like a holiday. Along with trying to bag their daily limit, hunters are also spending a lot of green in the state. Tonight, we take a closer look at their economic impact. We talk with South Dakota's Game Fish and Parks about what you need to keep in mind when in the field, plus the safety steps you should take with your hunting dog. Before hunters head to the field in their blaze orange, they may want to do a little scouting first. As KELOLAND's Don Jorgensen explains, some of the roads to pheasant hotspots could still be underwater.
Jason Jansen is getting in a little target practice shooting clay pigeons at Hunters Point near Humboldt, but he's hoping he'll be shooting pheasants soon.
I've got a 4-year-old son, so probably going to start maybe getting back into hunting again. It'll be kind of fun to take him out, even if it's just driving around and showing him pheasants and wildlife and stuff. So
Jansen and others will have to be careful, though, because a lot of roads are still underwater or washed out from recent heavy rainfall, meaning some traditional hot spots for pheasant hunters may be a little tougher to get to this season.
It can definitely make things more difficult, especially, as a pheasant hunter. I mean, if you hunt with a big group and then you've got, all of a sudden a big pond coming up that wasn't usually there, and now you got to reroute, and all those, dozen people got to find another way.
That's why officials are encouraging hunters, even those from out of state, to do their homework before opening day and do a little surveying of the roads and fields where they typically like to hunt.
But the big thing is, too, we might have some roads that are closed, poor conditions on some of those roads. So I think it's smart to get out there and take a look and see what it looks like where you hunt.
Wildlife Supervisor with the Game Fish and Parks Department, Josh Delger, wants everyone to be safe and says hunters need to respect any barricades that are up and don't drive around them.
The other thing to keep in mind, if hunting public or private, keep those landowners in mind. Don't drive in areas that could potentially be wet and cause problems for you. Just try to stay to the high ground.
The number of pheasants is down by 17% this year, blamed partially on spring flooding that washed out a lot of nesting grounds. But Delger doesn't think the most recent flooding will have any impact on the numbers.
We know that they've been displaced out of those habitats that have gotten flooded and received a lot of rainfall, but they usually can respond pretty well, and they're able to move and get to higher ground and be okay. So hopefully, we won't have much for loss in numbers of birds, but we'll see as the water recedes if they'll go back into those areas or not.
One thing he is sure about, though, even with all the standing water, there is still a flood of pheasants to be shot.
Yeah, exactly. Going into this spring and summer, we knew that there was potential for lower numbers of birds, lower numbers of broods, just because it was so wet. Actually, I'd say it was positive to see that we had decent numbers of birds after the way the spring and summer looked. So we're actually pretty happy about that.
One other positive note, Delger says, because there is so much habitat underwater right now, the pheasants have few places to hide.
The first weekend of the pheasant hunting season in South Dakota opens October 12th for in-state hunters. For out-of-state hunters, it's October 19th. Well, when those hunters step off the plane, they'll likely get the royal treatment at local airports. Their importance to the state when Inside KELOLAND returns. Welcome back to Inside KELOLAND. Pheasant hunters are getting ready to come to South Dakota with their guns, dogs, and lots of money. Last year, hunters spent an estimated $208 million in the state. Joining us now to talk about this economic boost and the big welcome put on for the guests is Terry Schmidt, the Executive Director for the Sioux Falls Convention and Visitors Bureau. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, and so it's a fun time of year, I bet, for you guys. You get to sort of throw a party at the airport.
We do. We throw a party at the airport.
Describe for people who haven't experienced it, what goes on over there?
Well, the Convention and Visitors Bureau sets up the main table area, and we have basically a big L, and they come down the people mover, and there we are with our annual mug of some kind that has Sioux Falls on it and all kinds of pheasants. There you go. You're seeing some photos. There's one of our staff handing one out. And we've got cookies and warm coffee, and sometimes we've got iced tea, and we chat with them, and they look at our shirts and all of our materials, and they ask us questions. And then they go on down the line, as you can see in some of the video, and we have about 14 or 15 other businesses that actually come with us and set up an exhibit, basically. They give away things, they sell things, they have games that you can spin a wheel and win something. And it's all about the hospitality. People are out there just saying, welcome to Sioux Falls. Here's what we have that can enhance your experience hunting in our community and our state. And here are ways to be safe, and everything from hotels to safety to just all around hospitality. You know what the real purpose of it is to say, you're not going to hunt right here in Sioux Falls, and we all know that, but welcome to our state, and that's why Sioux Falls does this. We know that they're flying here, they're renting cars, they're buying goods, and then they head west, north, a little bit south, and we want them to know that they're appreciated in South Dakota and that Sioux Falls really does welcome them and roll out the red carpet. It's really a party. It's a lot of fun.
It sounds like it. And so what's the reaction for especially the first-time hunters when they come down the escalator and see you all standing there waiting for them?
Well, some are a little taken back, like, I don't want to buy anything, and we're not selling anything. But pretty soon one of their buddies or somebody will say, oh, they just welcome us every year. One of the most fun reactions that I always think about is a few years ago, a gentleman came down the People Mover with a whole group of guys, and he had an old-fashioned video camera on his shoulder, and he's videoing and he's talking, and he comes down and he gets close to our face and he keeps going, videos the whole thing, and he comes back and he says, nobody in Miami believes the hospitality that you folks roll out up here, so I'm going to show them. And we thought, what would that have cost us to buy in advertising? So, you know, that was really fun because he did, and he comes every year. Another example is a gentleman who has come here for over 50 years. Every time he comes down that People Mover, we know he's coming, comes down, gets a great big hug. He knows everybody. A lot of people from across the state drive over to Sioux Falls to pick up their hunters because they've been going to their places, to their land to hunt every year. So it's a welcoming, it's like Old Home Week, a reunion for a lot of those people. And it's a little extra special for me, selfishly, I guess, because I'm from Winter originally. My heart home of the pheasant capital of the world, of course, because it's home. And it's fun to see people from Winter and out in that area coming over and also taking hunters, you know, out to Winter. The really important part of this whole thing is that, again, just because they fly into Sioux Falls, we know they aren't hunting here, but this is what's good for our entire state. This is all of us working together. It's a win-win to make our state stronger. It's economic development. You never know who's going to come down that People Mover or fly into an airport in another part of the state. They might be a CEO of a major company. They might be somebody looking to relocate. They might want to look for a place to retire and bring their family. And even more fun, more and more women are becoming pheasant hunters. So we've seen a change in that as well. More women coming down with their grandpas, their dads, little brothers, little sons and daughters. So it's just really, really fun.
That's awesome. And you sort of already touched on it. It's important for the whole state, but we do get a little of that economic impact right here in Sioux Falls, right? Explain how we can benefit even if they're not hunting necessarily in Minnehaha.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, they rent cars. I mean, to go to the airport and try to get a rental car, especially on the opening weekend of pheasant season, is pretty tough. They're rented out. So there's an economic shot in the arm. Many of them stay overnight in our hotels, either right before or right after, as their hunting groups are waiting for flights. So we get some hotel business. We also get a grocery store business. One year, I had to run over to one of the grocery stores during the welcome because we ran out of cookies. And so I ran to the grocery store, and the general manager was out on the floor, and he was just stacking loaves of bread as fast as he could. And so I asked him, and he said, the hunters have been in here. They bought all of our bread, cold meat, cheeses, and beverages, and chips. And so there's another thing that people really don't think of. And then if the weather's different than what they had planned on, they head to our stores to buy clothing.
Oh, sure.
Many of them buy their licenses, buy shotgun shells, and a variety of other things. So absolutely, Sioux Falls does get an economic shot in the arm before they head out and when they come back.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so how far in advance do you guys prepare for the grand welcoming?
Oh, every year, the minute we're done with this welcoming, we'll sit down and say, okay, what went well? What didn't go so well? What do we want to change for next year? We'll let it rest for a couple of months, and then we'll start again. Probably, we'll start talking about it in early spring. Then we'll let it rest a little bit, and then late summer, we start again planning.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been fun, and if you stop by the airport, say hi to Terry.
Say hi to the hunters.
Yeah, all right. Well, up next, what you need to keep in mind once you reach the hunting grounds inside KELOLAND. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Inside KELOLAND. Hunters are eager to get in the fields in search of the state bird, the ringneck pheasant. Joining us now with what hunters need to keep in mind during their hunt is Randy Johnson with the South Dakota Game, Fish, and Parks. Welcome, Randy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So describe for people what actually is the outlook for this year's pheasant season.
Yeah, so this year, the numbers actually look like they're pretty much on par with what we've seen the last couple of years. You know, those numbers are based on our pheasant survey we do every summer. We run 110 standardized routes across the state. And, you know, we look at, we run the same routes every year, and it gets us the ability to calculate a population index. And we look at changes in the numbers from year to year. And like I said, this year is looking across the state on par with the last couple of years. You know, coming off of a tough winter and a really wet spring, we expected some ups and especially some downs. So thankfully, most areas are on par. And in fact, several areas were actually up from the last few years. So I think there's birds out there to be found, and I think guys that get out there will have a good time.
That's good news, I'm sure, for a lot of hunters.
Yeah. I mean, coming off of a really tough winter and a crazy spring, I think overall, you know, the results were pretty good.
And so I know, you know, weather plays a big part, but is there anything that the landowners have been doing or can do to help get the numbers steady?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, weather from year to year is a big thing, but of course there's not much I can do. But, you know, habitat on the ground is still one of the major components to the pheasant numbers we see in the fall. So if a landowner is interested, you know, we can come out and do an assessment and take a look at, you know, whether they need some winter cover like shrubs or cattail sloughs to help them through the winter time, or nesting cover, things like grasses and forbs and wildflowers. That's all critical components to having a good population of pheasants in the fall. So if landowners are interested, I would encourage them to reach out to GFP. We have a variety of habitat programs available. We have private lands biologists that can offer technical advice and a whole variety of programs. So I'd encourage folks to reach out.
Very cool. And so which parts of the state are the most populated for pheasants? Where are hunters going to find the best shots?
Right. So actually, I mean, we have good hunting opportunity across a lot of areas of the state. No matter where you live, you really don't have to drive too far to find something. But of course, you know, areas like Aberdeen, down through Redfield, Huron, the Winter area, the Chamberlain area, Mitchell, Pierre, I mean, they're all really good areas to go find birds. But again, there's local hotspots across most of the state.
Yeah, that's awesome, especially for the state economy like we were talking with Terry. When hunters are going out, whether it's alone or as a group, what do they need to keep in mind when they're out there?
Yeah, I would say safety is always the big thing, especially as we're approaching opener. You know, folks haven't been out since last year. It's important to just keep things safe, whether you're out there by yourself or out in a group. Of course, wear your hunter orange. Remember to wear an orange cap and not just a vest. You know, keep in mind where other hunters are at, where the dogs are at, those types of things. And again, just with opener, you know, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of anticipation, and it's just important to try to remember to be safe while you're out there.
Nice.
And again, with roads too, we mentioned it earlier, there's going to be, anticipate issues with roads and section lines getting out there. Plan ahead for it and just be respectful as you're out there.
Sure. And is there any extra safety if you're hunting alone? Is that dangerous, or?
I wouldn't say it's dangerous necessarily, but just with anything, whether you're pheasant hunting or any other type of hunting, it's good to let people know where you're going to be, when you're going to be back. You know, we have good cell phone service, but it's always good to carry a GPS if you're really going out far, or you know, things like that. Just be prepared.
Good, yeah. And so we're talking about when people get out there and they're actually firing their shots, how many can they actually kill? What's allowed?
So the limit is 3 roosters, no hens, and that's a daily limit.
Oh.
And that's pretty much been the standard for many years.
Oh, wow. And that's throughout the whole season?
Yep.
3 a day? Wow.
Yep.
And that's okay for the population? It can withstand that much?
Absolutely, yeah. There's been a lot of research over the years. That's one of the reasons we protect the hens, of course, but the breeding structure of pheasants is that you just need to protect the female stock, and you know, as you go into winter, a lot of those birds won't make it anyway, so that's the whole idea, is we're able to go out and utilize those birds and take advantage of that surplus crop and take advantage of it.
Okay, that makes sense. Now this says you're a wildlife resource biologist.
That is my job title, yes.
What does that mean? What do you do?
So I do a wide variety of things. I'm stationed here in Sioux Falls, but I cover 20 counties across the southeast part of South Dakota. So I'm involved in quite a few different aspects of wildlife management. My primary duties revolve around, you know, collecting data on a variety of species. So whether that's tracking radio collared deer or conducting these pheasant surveys. I'm involved in some different research activities as well. Cool. And we're constantly doing, you know, wildlife disease monitoring. I get involved in some educational aspects too with some of the local schools and the outdoor campus here in town. So I get a lot of variety in this position, and it's one of the reasons I really like it.
Nice. And so you mentioned off camera, you're a hunter as well. What's the best part for you as a hunter? Terry didn't mention if she was a hunter or not.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the biggest part for me is just getting outside and just being part of nature. You know, I think, you know, when you get to your limit or bag a buck or something, you know, it's always fun. But when you look back, it's always just the time you spend outside and the unexpected things you see while you're out there. And of course, time with friends and family too that's what really you look back on down the road. You know, those things like that.
Thank you, Randy. We'll put resources to GFMP on KELOLAND.com.
Sounds good.
Well, along with preparing yourself for the hunt, you also need to get your hunting dogs ready. A few reminders when Inside KELOLAND returns. Welcome back to Inside KELOLAND. The pheasant hunting season may be just as exciting for the dogs that get to go on the trip as their humans. Joining us tonight with a few safety reminders for your furry companion is veterinarian Jennifer Stevens and this sweet little puppy. You can barely see because he blends in with my dress, but oh.
He's adorable, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is just an example of a puppy who will be going out hunting someday, right?
That is correct. So he's a German short-hair pointer. He's about 4.5 weeks old. And he will have probably his first hunting exposure next year.
Wow, so soon. So for those pheasant openers, it's not far away. How should the humans be conditioning the puppies who are old enough to go out?
It's really important to start walking and running our companions before we get to the opener, because as we all know, sometimes the opener is very warm. And then we go and expect them to run a long distance. So for example, some people estimate that our hunting companions, our dogs, run 2 to 4 miles for every mile that we walk.
Wow.
So that takes some conditioning. These guys are athletes just like humans, and so a human marathon runner won't go out and just run a marathon. They need some training that goes along with that. So that's really important. The other thing is making sure that they're an appropriate weight. We sometimes overfeed our dogs during the summer, or we don't get as much exercise. And so then they put on a little extra weight, and that is harder on their joints, harder for them to get back into shape when it comes to hunting season. So those are just a couple of things. But then one thing that my hunter, my family, my husband Brian reminded me is that working on those good commands, sit, stay, heel, come, are also really important reminders to have for your dog as you're getting ready to go into hunting season. So that when the tailgate goes down and they're ready and they're birdie and they see those birds, they don't forget who's in charge.
Yes, that makes sense. And also, you know, probably a big part of it is safety, not only humans, but the pets.
Absolutely.
What kind of gear should they have so that they're protected as well when they're out in the field?
I'm sure most of our folks have seen those orange vests that some dogs can wear, and they can be a really good idea to protect the body of the dog, and also they can help us find the dog if we're out hunting, or at least see them out as they're out and about. The hard part is if they're like my 2 short hairs at home, they dig underneath the cattails, and then you lose them anyway. But if you do decide to put a vest on your dog, make sure it's adjusted appropriately.
Okay.
If they're too tight, it's constricting. If they're too loose, the dog may get caught and stuck in something.
Yeah.
So just making sure that it's adjusted properly. My older dog, Maya, gets a lot of sores in her armpits when she wears her vest. So just making sure that you're watching the vest throughout the day, watching the skin of the dog, and that there's not some sores that come about with that vest.
Is there anything you can take in case they do start to get sores? Any salve or anything?
You know, there's lots of lotions over the counter, like Aquaphor is one that we will use. Bag balm is something that some of our clients use as well. So that does help. The main thing is you don't want your dog to lick it off.
Yeah. And then microchipping. Explain why that's important.
So a microchip is the size of a grain of rice. It is inserted into the dog right in between the shoulder blades underneath the skin. It carries a number that a veterinary clinic, Humane Society, or animal control would have a reader for that. That microchip emits a number to that reader. That number is specific to your dog. It's also connected to your contact information. So if your dog is lost, that number will be associated with your contact information. You are contacted. However, we have had this happen where the contact information isn't up to date. So if you do have your pet microchipped, make sure that you do update your contact information if you move or have a different telephone number. As far as that being out in the field, if your pet isn't microchipped, you can use ID tags in case they get lost. We use collars that have a brass nameplate on them so that our dogs have that on. Some veterinary clinics have the ability to look up the rabies tag number, and that's associated with your contact information.
Yeah.
So there's other tricks to keeping your dog safe and getting them back home if they do get lost.
Very nice. And I assume vaccines are important, especially when you're heading out into nature.
Absolutely. We talk a lot about rabies vaccine because obviously that's a deadly zoonotic disease. And so that one's really important. It's also required by law. A lot of people hear about the distemper parvo vaccine. It also absolutely covers for other viruses. It's not just those two. However, we do see those 2 viruses, distemper and parvovirus, still in South Dakota. So it's important to talk to your veterinarian about getting that vaccine boosted appropriately. Bordetella or kennel cough vaccine is also important if you have other dogs that will be in your hunting party. Couple of other vaccines that can be important. I recommend the leptospirosis vaccine for all of my hunting patients. The reason for that is leptospirosis is a bacteria that most animals have.
Okay.
It is emitted, the bacteria comes out in the urine of animals, so you'll find the bacteria in waterways.
Okay.
The important thing about leptospirosis is that it can make our dogs very, very sick.
Yeah.
It also is zoonotic, so humans can get sick from that one. So that one's a good one to have on board as well.
Awesome information. We're going to put all of this online and contact information. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for bringing this puppy. You can find out more about today's topics online at KELOLAND.com. Just click on the Inside KELOLAND section. Join us every Sunday following the 10 o'clock news right here on KELO TV. That's all the time we have for today. Be sure to join us again next week for more of what's going on inside KELOLAND.